you've heard so many things and taken in so many things. You really have to pinprick for those things that you really feel are unique for you and you really want to explore.
Hey, everybody, welcome to this Prog chat. Today we have Ethan Matthews. I guess it's a solo project, Ethan. You're sort of a solo one-man show, or?
Traditionally, it was a solo project. Yeah, coming out of I formed Echo Us with my former bandmate in Greyhaven, who was our live keyboardist for a while back in the year 2000, basically. So it's had a long history. Started as a band and then moved in about 2002, 2003 to being more my solo project, and then a whole bunch of other musicians kind of got involved from that point on as well. So.
Okay, and for anyone who's watching, if you're curious kind of what kind of music Echo Us is, it's, well, to me, I just started listening to it this week. I was reminded of artists such as David Sylvian, Mike Oldfield, Vangelis, sort of maybe even like sort of Tangerine Dream. It's sort of a new age feel in there. There's some instrumental and some vocals. Would you say you just sort of divide between?
Yeah, I have trouble writing instrumental music purely. I work off vocal melodies and lyrics almost exclusively, and I wish I could get rid of that actually and write something completely instrumental. But I've always been, since Echo Us started really way back when, I've always been a melody guy and into vocal melodies and how they guide me and concepts and words and phrases and where they take me. Before that, in Greyhaven, I didn't really write vocal melodies. I let the vocalist handle that. We wrote all the music, and then he came in and did the vocal melodies and lyrics himself. But yeah, I'm definitely guided by lyrics and moods that come up because of those. And don't spend, like I said, I would love to make an album that would be purely instrumental, and mostly what I listen to for pleasure is instrumental music, actually. Back to, you're talking Tangerine Dream and Vangelis and so much of that older electronic psychedelic instrumental music was a big influence on me post my metal years in high school.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I think on my channel I do focus on songwriting sometimes. So I'm curious what your process is. You said that you'd kind of prefer to do more instrumental, but it sounds like your muse or your inspiration is always pulling you in a sort of a different direction. So how does that work for you?
Process wise, it depends. I mean, sometimes lyrics are kind of just come to me. That tends to be the best material, is when it just kind of seems to be downloaded upon oneself, and it's like universe is commanding you to do this thing. And you do that thing, and it feels great. And usually the music comes out fairly fluidly to support those lyrics. There are other times where I will do rearrangements of things where I built up something, let's say, that didn't have a drum groove to it, or much of a drum groove to it, and was really light, and then and maybe ambient. And then it turns into something that's got a drum groove. And I mean, like, It's Time for Winter off of Inland Empire, the new album, is a great example of that, because when it was written, it was just like a plodding keyboard line. The lyrics came pretty fast, and the harmonic and melodic structure was all there. But then, and when I finished it off in 2013, when this album was originally completely done, being an archival work, I was finished over a long period of time. Yeah, It's Time for Winter kind of had this extra boisterousness with the drum groove added to it. So there's a lot of different ways that I go about creating the music. A lot of it is done with electronics, but I also will write just from a piano standpoint. And just sometimes you don't want to get confused with a ton of electronics, unless it's a very basic sound that you're working with. And that's kind of the difference, I think, between some electronic music and a lot of more like singer-songwriter or even a lot of progressive rock, is that we spend a lot of time just playing with guitar, voice, drums, and piano, and basic sounds, and then kind of marriage them out, I guess you would say, with other sound design and things of that nature. But sometimes I have written, completely from the ground up quite a bit with synthesizers, and I don't really have I know a lot of singer songwriters will be very fundamental about, well, I don't write with anything but my bass instrument, and I understand that approach, but I don't really think that there's a wrong or right way. I think it just depends on how things come together, how you're connecting with universe, and but for me, going back to that vocal melody thing, that the vocal melody will typically come to me inside my head, maybe with lyrics, maybe without, but it kind of feels like it's just fluttering through my mind and it won't stop. And when that happens, that's when I kind of know that, like, I need to write this thing down, and this is inspiration, and I need to work for it, or work towards it, I should say.
Right, right. That's interesting you mentioned that. I sort of took note of other songwriters who have talked about how song ideas come to them. And I remember The Edge of U2 was talking about, I don't remember, I can't hardly paraphrase, but I just remember the intention he was talking about. The song was sort of downloaded to him. Paul McCartney woke up with Yesterday in his thought. He probably dreamed it or something. Neil Young, who when he gets an idea, it just comes to him, and he has to tell his family and says, sorry, I gotta go, and he'll just leave dinner or whatever, and he'll just go and track something quickly, because he knows that if he doesn't, the idea may vanish or disappear.
It's funny. I mean, I used to hear, I think it's Gene Roddenberry with Star Trek. I heard someone say this, and it's secondhand, so I'm not sure if it's true, but it said that he used to wake up with full episodes in his head, which I thought was funny. It could have been a joke, but I mean, I know that that's something that is talked about amongst all kinds of creatives for forever. It's just that, something just comes to you, and you feel commanded to go after it. And sometimes it usually becomes very easy at that point. I mean, with my music, sometimes it can get kind of crazy and nutty, because I do get into complicated areas where I do need to sit down and analyze something harmonically, and work on how guitar and keyboard parts interplay and that kind of stuff. It's not just strumming and then having a great melody. The basis and is the simple stuff. And I kind of I like a lot of pop music, not really current pop music, but more like 70s, 80s, even 90s music that is simpler. And that kind of started after I got into prog metal and prog rock in the 90s, growing up and, learning all the guitar shedding stuff. And then I kind of just got sick of it and started listening to Bjork and Depeche Mode. And
cool.
Yeah, I completely changed course in many ways, and then kind of came back to prog later. But yeah, getting back to your point, it's just, I can't really, I write hundreds of hours of music, it seems like. I mean, I've just got hundreds of sketches in my folders on my computer, and 95% of it goes nowhere. It just sits there, and I don't touch it again and never go back to it. But there are always those special ideas, and you usually know right when they're going to come. So,
So let me ask you briefly about your musical training. Like you mentioned, you were into different genres of music over time. And what instrument did you start out with? Keyboards or guitar? Or?
I started out by being, like a lot of kids, forced to take piano lessons, and wasn't so into it at the time. But that was third grade, basically, second or third grade, and just kept doing it, and getting better. And then about the age of 12 or so, I discovered rock music, basically, to the horror of my parents and piano teacher, and said, I'm going to quit taking piano, and my dad's going to get me a guitar, and and I did that for about a year without really, just messing around with it, and I was on my way out with piano, and then started taking lessons about around 13, maybe. Kind of came back to using piano and synthesizers with Greyhaven later on in high school, because I discovered, it was kind of actually discovering Tangerine Dream, because I was into a lot of guitar-based music like Joe Satriani and even Alan Holdsworth, and I was trying to learn from those players, and Steve Vai, obviously, and others. And then I heard my dad in his office one day, they were playing a Tangerine Dream album. I think it was actually Tyranny of Beauty in the 1990s, like 94 or 95. And I heard that, and I was just like, I know this is kind of new age music, but I kind of like it. And I like techno to some degree, and that album had a bit of techno vibe to it, to some of the tracks. And that's kind of what set me off with getting forming Greyhaven and going into playing synthesizers. And so I bought like a chord wave station, and we figured out ways to make that keyboard play bass lines and do different things that I basically I went to this guy's house, and he had two keyboards, and one was a Korg wave station and one was like a Korg T3. And he showed me some of the stuff, like the wave sequencing that the wave station could do. And they showed me the T3, which basically kind of sounded like an M1 or something. It just wasn't very interesting, except it had a full sequencer in it. But for some reason, I went right for the wave station. I was like, that's the keyboard we got to get. And that was actually kind of a fated equipment purchase in a lot of ways, and led to, I've had 3 or 4 of those different models of that particular synth, plus a bunch of other stuff over the years. But yeah, the synthesizer aspect got much bigger too, I think, after Greyhaven and Echo S started. So, but yeah, guitar is my formal instrument. So
you've got a new album that just, I think it was February 7th or 9th that it came out, 2023. It's new, but it's not quite new. You want to explain about that?
Yeah, that was weird. So like in 2013, I was getting ready to move from a studio space that I had here in Portland, and I was finishing A Priori Memory, which was released in 2014, like about a year later. And at the same time, I was also had like all of these tracks that were laying around from The Tide Decides and from Tomorrow Will Tell the Story, and also A Priori. And it just made sense that a lot of these were really, well, they were very strong. It's Time for Winter being one of the strongest, and then Inland Empire, the title track, and then others. And then I had a few new songs that just didn't really go any particular place. I was kind of like, well, I need to finish this, and it's coming together. So I was working on A Priori and also working on Inland Empire almost concurrently at the same time. And every night, basically, I did like an 8-hour session. I'd switch from album to album, boom, boom, back and forth for a couple of months of really hard work to get those two done at the same time. And then it sat there because for all these years, because I signed this deal with this label in Germany called Dust on the Tracks. And I had sent them A Priori because it was done like maybe a month sooner or so, or a couple of months, something like that. I don't remember. I sent it to them, and they wanted to release it, as fast as I could. I was like, well, I really like this other thing, but it's not as proggy, I don't know if they'll like it. So I kind of like, it's a little bit more ambient than than A Priori. So I kind of just left it, and then was gonna release it when I moved into a new proper studio space in 2016, and then made a video for It's Time for Winter, and it was all on the track to release Inland Empire in 2017. But I just started writing again, which moved into Wake a Dream and Moving Water. That was just too new to me at the time, and I had to follow the path, and that album kind of had a different theme to it. It wasn't, it was ambient, but it was more of a Celtic album. It was kind of billed as a Celtic album. I had to do that at the time. So I was just like, well, I guess I'm going to put it on hold. And then it got put on hold again for Windsong, that came out in 2021. And so now it was just like, I'm kind of just writing a bit, and it was, there's a good open time in my schedule to kind of just get this out there and, let it do whatever it was going to do. Back then, I don't know, it was kind of one of those things where I was just like, well, maybe it's not quite the right time to release it yet, at least for me personally. And, we'll see what happens when it does get out there. But it was completely done in 2013. It was mastered and everything. And I had even started building artwork in 2016 when I, eventually wanted to release it then. But but yeah, a lot of things got in the way.
How are things going for you now overall, musically and life, and going, having the
Yeah.
pandemic kind of being over now, more or less? And
Yeah, it's been, I mean, the pandemic has been completely non-starter for me. I mean, I write lots of music, but it hasn't really, I know I have some artist friends and different types of art and different things, and they've had quite a bit going on during the downtime initially, at least in 2020. I remember talking to friends and being like, oh yeah, it's great for me because there's just nothing going on. So, you know, I have this freedom of mind. And I think I also kind of got off. I did a lot of things for many, many years. And, you know, there is a certain point, you know, where you do dry up of some ideas of inspiration and you need a break. And I have really, that's also what part of releasing Inland Empire is for me right now, is I needed an artistic creative break of just like figuring out what am I going to do in the future. You know, will it even be, you know, another Echo Us album? Maybe I do something else, or release a proper solo album
Mhm.
without a band name attached to it and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, like uh, you know, I was working last night and I'm working on some new stuff. Really love it. It's so far in the ambient direction. I think it would be at least another year before I'll, you know, have something in any kind of completion stages. I'm also just kind of exploring, hopefully, some new equipment as well, and get some new sounds and, you know, microphones and things like that, and see where things go. I think it'll be an interesting time for me because I've never had the only other time I had a complete flush out was in 2004 or 2003 ish, around in there, right before I did the Echo Us debut. There was a period of like 2 years where I did nothing, you know, and that's how I am. If things are depressed or not going well, or I have to focus on other areas of life, I just let it go. And I do what I have to do. And, you know, I mean, some people take 5-year breaks between albums, you know, especially when, you know, I hate to say it, when you get older, it's like you really have to fight because you've heard so much music, you know, you've heard so many things and taken in so many things. You really have to pinprick for those things that you really feel are unique for you and you really want to explore.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's an interesting time. It's been an interesting few years. So
The one way I looked at it myself as a creative person like you, is it's kind of like seasons, where you have that spring or summer, where however you want to call it, that season where you're doing a lot of creative work. You're coming up with new ideas. You're lots of new songs, and then the next season will seem very barren comparatively, but the next season may be something else in your life. I think it's a natural flow, and it sounds pretty normal to me what you're experiencing.
that's good. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So your new album is called it's Echo S, and it's in, what is it? I'm sorry, Empire in Empire?
Inland Empire is the name of the new one.
Right,
Yeah.
Inland Empire. And you have a website, echous.net, right?
Yep, echous.net, and there's Facebook and all the usual. Be a few magazine articles coming out in the next month or so on it, mostly overseas in Europe. I'm here in Oregon. It was good to see that you're from BC,
Yeah.
by the way. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's nice. I mentioned I used to go up there as a kid. I think the last time I was up there was 2006 or so, something like that. It's
Oh,
been
okay.
way too long, but yeah, it's beautiful up there.
I've been to Portland a couple times too as well. I liked it down there. That was before the pandemic and before all those riots that were going on, though. It sounds a bit scary,
Mhm.
scarier now there than it used to be, would you say?
It's it is quieted down from all of that. It's right
Oh, good.
now, there, you know, we do have a large amount of problems with our downtown that we didn't have before. I mean, Portland used to be one of those kind of textbook West Coast cities. It was just beautiful in the 90s and very well taken care of. It was kind of like it was just very well run and you know, for many years. And yeah, there's just been a lot of upheaval, you know, going on. And I live right near downtown, and you know, if you're not right in downtown, you don't experience a whole lot of that. But yeah, we've got a lot of challenges, and it's another interest area of mine over the years, and where where society's heading. And, unfortunately, it's a lot of darkness, in recent years for different reasons other than just the 2020 situation. I remember talking to someone, they were like, well, that could also happen because we were locked down, could have been misplaced anger, and that was someone talking off the top of their head at the time. And I was like, yeah, we don't know why this is happening, really, like all happening at once right now. But Portland, I think it will recover, but it's kind of also been a bit blown up, I think, on the news as to really like how awful the situation is. It's certainly bad, but it's not Chicago either. It doesn't have, the kind of murder rate and things like that some of the bigger cities have. But yeah, it's kind of been in the news a lot. This is always been an activist city, a huge activist city, all the way back in the 90s and probably earlier as well. So, but yeah, I grew up in Oregon. I grew up in Eugene, and ended up living here after college because a friend of mine was moving here, and actually Grey Haven's singer from San Diego, Brian Francis, ended up moving here about the same time I did, and we just decided, well, let's just move together. So we did that in 2003. But yeah, I've kind of been here for the most part ever since. So.
Mm-hmm. And is Grey Haven do you guys have music up online from those days, or?
So we started as we were a prog metal band basically, but with a lot of synthesizer work in it. It was kind of one of these underground bands in the 90s that kind of got a bit of notice, I would say. It had a few bigger articles published. I mean, one was like on about.com and a few others, but it was really mostly very underground, and signed to this small record label called Angular Records, which was also, I think, associated with Musea of France back at that time. And at least I think that was their distributor. And yeah, we got some notice with that, played a festival, quite a few other shows. And that album has always been in that community, I think, seen as a sort of a little known watermark in some ways, I guess, is how some people would describe it. I mean, looking back on it, to me, it's a little sophomoric because I was so young, and it's not really mature, especially in production. But that kind of, got me my start, and it was a very inspirational time in my life was working in that band and kind of growing from being a 16, 17-year-old kid into a 21-year-old was that time period. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for this interview, Ethan. And once again, Echo Us, the new album is out, and it's not something you're performing live, is it? It's mostly just a recording project, is it?
It is. It's been primarily recording since 2003, but I did live shows in 2013 all the way to 2015. Quite a few shows during that period, and it's something I might always come back to again. It's just you got to get the musicians together and make it all work. I did during that period, we did acoustic shows. I used to play with a harpist, and then that kind of morphed into having like a small trio with some electronics. I've always been primarily a studio guy, but when the inspiration strikes, I force it and force myself to go out there and do it again. So yeah.
Well, that sounds interesting with a harpist. That's cool. So it was more Celtic-y, was it? Kind of a Celtic harp, or?
She played Celtic harp, but she also played pedal harp, orchestral. So there was both going on. We used to play at like art galleries and do like acoustic Echo Us arrangements. It was a lot of work because I had to rearrange a lot of Echo Us material to just be kind of simpler acoustic songs.
Mm-hmm.
Not simpler necessarily, but I kind of had to pare them down and just play classical guitar along with her and sing. But yeah, the electronic shows had a bit more power behind them because we had a drummer and everything. So I think that was in a way more fun because I also like, when there's a combination of acoustic instruments or electric instruments with synthesizers and drums live, like that's something I always have enjoyed live music wise. So,
mm-hmm. So echos.net. Everybody
Yes.
check out all those. I'll put some links down below. Maybe you can email me all the links you'd like to have below the video so people
Yeah,
can.
absolutely. I will.
So it was really nice to meet and chat with you, Ethan, and you have a good rest of your day, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks, Dean. Good to meet you.
Okay. Good to meet you.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.